Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction, and in this one we got natural, handcrafted, artisanal streets. Before we dive in, if you guys happen to enjoy, please don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Give the video a thumbs up. Also, if you'd like to support this channel by becoming a member, all you gotta do is hit that join button to receive your exclusive benefits. Let's dive right in.
Asphalt is a great material for roads. It provides a smooth, even surface that makes a road safe and comfortable for high-speed traffic. It's relatively cost-effective to install, especially over large areas like highways. And it can be laid very quickly, especially if you're these guys. So asphalt is routinely used around the world, and here in the Netherlands, it's normal to see asphalt on highways and roads. But the streets are different. Most Dutch streets are built out of pre-constructed brick pavers called clinkers. The driving surface, the sidewalks, the curbs, and even some of the road markings. Where and why these clinkers are used instead of asphalt is genuinely interesting, and they reveal a lot
to be cheaper. It got to be cheaper, right?
about the fundamental philosophy of Dutch street design. So let me share with you the magic of these handcrafted, artisanal streets. In a typical city, it's common to see stone pavers used in historic neighborhoods. They might even use natural-style cobblestones for that medieval feel. In this case, pavers are being used primarily for aesthetic purposes, which is lovely. Until you have to hear a tourist dragging the rolly suitcase across them, at which point you'll wish they had asphalt in the Middle Ages. And brick streets have been around for thousands of years, so of course the streets of historic city centers in the Netherlands will be made out of bricks.
Yes.
But what's more interesting is that clinkers are used all over the Netherlands, even in recently built neighborhoods like this one. The clinkers themselves are usually made out of river clay, but they are sometimes made out of concrete or a mix of recycled materials. The clay bricks are baked at a high temperature so that they are much more durable than the bricks used in buildings. If you're interested in learning more, I'll leave a link to this video by the manufacturer in the description. Technically, the proper name for these are straatbaksteen, which literally translates as street bricks, but that's a really boring name, so most people call them clinkers. Oh, and they're called clinkers because they make this sound. Which, I mean, I just love that. Also, random fact, clinkers is the Dutch word for vowels, but just to be clear, this video is about street bricks, not A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes I.
Okay.
Clinkers come in many different shapes and sizes, but it is these three that are typically used to make most streets in the Netherlands, and they're typically used in one of these 6 patterns. Municipalities are able to decide for themselves which clinkers are used where, but there is some degree of standardization across the country, sometimes just for practical reasons. For example, most driving surfaces use the Kai-format clinkers in Caperverband, because this orientation is the most resistant to displacement from tires rolling along the street. Elleboogverband is common for parking spaces, and you can see here how the area for driving and the area for parking is differentiated by the different brick pattern. Temporary loading zones have an X across them using diagonal lines of white clinkers, which, when you look closely, actually requires a lot of diagonal brick cutting. Though I've noticed newer streets have a more pixelated X, so maybe they got tired of cutting all those bricks.
Yeah, they said we can't do all that. They said pixelated seems a lot easier. This is very interesting though. So, y'all do y'all use asphalt anywhere in the Netherlands, or is it just clinkers with different designs and different kinds of clinkers that y'all use for parking, for streets, for that? This is interesting.
And I like how the parking space for this microcar is outlined on the sidewalk in white clinkers. One thing I found interesting is that there's a new trend of putting parking spaces up onto the curb at sidewalk level instead of on the road, and I think that's interesting. When parking spots are on the road, if there aren't any parked cars, then the street becomes bigger, which we know encourages people to speed. But when the parking spaces are on the sidewalk, it allows the sidewalk to be bigger when there are no cars there, which is a lot nicer. I think
Understandable.
this is great because given Amsterdam's plan to remove 10,000 parking spaces and to make the city less friendly to driving, it's likely that over time these parking spaces will naturally become wider sidewalks. Speaking of sidewalks, they are usually made of square tiles called stoeptegels, which literally means sidewalk tiles. So, yeah, very descriptive name there. These square tiles are a standard size, and there are special tiles that are used as signs, or for wayfinding for visual impaired people, or for hiding away a fire hydrant connection. Here, white clinkers are being used to show where bicycles are allowed to be parked on the sidewalk. In pedestrianized areas, different patterns are used, sometimes to distinguish specific uses, but often just for aesthetics. On
That's
streets,
cool.
different clinkers can be used to indicate
Yo!
important information,
Oh,
like
y'all use clinkers for everything, huh? This is cool. I'm liking these clinker designs though. Like that's cool, yo. Whereas I feel like we painted on the asphalt in some way, shape, or form. Y'all got it clinked in,
the
bro.
start of this school zone, or just to make the street look nicer. Curbs use these long segments that have rounded tabs at the end to lock together. So instead of being poured, like concrete curbs and sidewalks, they're assembled from pieces like a Lego set. Incidentally, for the research for this video, I had a lot of help from Stefan, who runs the YouTube channel Build the Lanes.
Okay.
He is a traffic engineer from the United States who moved to the Netherlands to become a transportation engineer, so he was the perfect person to talk to about the differences in construction methods. If you'd like to learn more about Dutch versus US street design, you should definitely check out Build the Lanes. Like the video he made about the reconstruction of his own street in Haarlem that goes into more detail about how a Dutch street is constructed. I'll leave a link in the description. When a street is being newly constructed, the clinkers are brought in by truck on pallets.
Okay.
The curbs are placed first to define the space, and then all of the clinkers are assembled around them.
That makes sense.
Small sections are usually done by hand in whatever pattern is required, but larger sections can be done by machine.
Okay. 'Cause
Here,
I,
group
I was wondering, I was like, do y'all like they really by hand every time y'all put in a new street or y'all put these clinkers in one by one? I was like, that's absolutely wild to me. So smaller sections you can do by hand, but larger sections y'all do have machines for.
groups of clinkers have been pre-assembled into the desired
Okay.
patterns and then lifted in place by machine to lay the bulk of the street,
Well, there
while
you
the rest
go.
will be filled in by hand. There are also machines that can lay down the clinkers for an entire street like a
Oh,
carpet, but I'm not sure how common these are because I've never seen one in person.
that's pretty
This video
dope.
is from the manufacturer.
I like that.
When I
I
see
like
streets being
that.
constructed or reconstructed, it usually looks like this: one compact excavator to help with the lifting, and a couple of guys laying clinkers. I think this is interesting because the trucks and machines needed to lay clinkers are much smaller and more lightweight than the machines used for asphalt or
Yeah,
concrete.
I would
It's
imagine.
kind of crazy to see how much space is needed for a concrete truck and crew to lay a concrete sidewalk here in Toronto
I
versus
feel
one made
that.
with clinkers here in Amsterdam. But even better, when work is being done on an existing street, the clinkers are reused, so no heavy equipment needs to be brought in at all.
Mm.
When a street needs to be dug up, say to install new cables or pipes, the kind of thing that happens often in any city, the old clinkers are removed and set aside. When the work is done, the clinkers are put back in
Yeah,
place, and you can't even tell that they were dug up at all. The only
that's
indication that
pretty
this
dope.
sidewalk was completely torn up to install fiber optic cables are these cute little fiber sprouts growing up from the sidewalk at every front door. This is one of my absolute favorite things about streets, and especially sidewalks made with clinkers, because when work has been done on the street, the surface quality is almost always better after the construction. One of the things I absolutely hated about Canadian cities is that when sidewalks were torn up for whatever reason, they would just fill in the holes with these blobs of asphalt. Not only does this look like shit, it also makes for a rough and uneven surface on sidewalks and bike lanes. And the city
Yeah.
is absolutely
Oh,
covered in these ugly asphalt scars that last for years and sometimes even decades.
nah, it definitely look ugly. He's starting to persuade me more toward the clinker side of the argument in this video because this definitely is not attractive at all.
This street in Toronto
One bit.
actually has these really nice brick pavers, but they still slice through it with these awful blobs of asphalt. Like, you could just replace the bricks, people! Ironically, the Dutch sometimes have the opposite problem. When asphalt is dug up, they often
Oh,
fill in the hole with clinkers, which just looks bizarre.
it does.
Although
It
I don't
does.
really like it when they do this on bicycle paths because it makes for a rough patch on the otherwise smooth red asphalt.
Got
Not as bad as the asphalt blobs in Canada, I suppose, but it's still not ideal. Many
yeah,
bicycle
it ain't
paths in the
pretty.
Netherlands are made out of clinkers, which is fine, as long as they're properly maintained. But the
Mm.
gold standard in the Netherlands is this red asphalt, which is used on busier routes. The distinctive color is not painted on, it's actually red stone and red pigment that is added to the asphalt mix.
Oh,
This is more expensive than paint, but paint can create a more slippery surface, and the color doesn't last as long as dyed asphalt.
so good choice.
This makes for a very smooth cycling surface, and the red color makes it clear where people are expected to cycle. There are also special smooth clinkers that are more expensive but are more comfortable to cycle on, and these are used on busy cycling routes where asphalt would not be appropriate aesthetically, such as this street in the center of Haarlem. As I mentioned earlier, when reconstructing a street, all of the clinkers are reused to reassemble the street, and this can be done entirely by hand without requiring any heavy machinery
Yeah,
or
hey, my
concrete
boy
trucks or anything
killing
else.
it,
Any
dog.
damaged clinkers may be replaced, but otherwise, no new material needs to be brought in at all, which really simplifies reconstruction. And the best part is that any clinkers that are too worn down aren't thrown away. In fact, they're actually in very high demand, and I love what they do with them.
Really?
This is the historic square in Haarlem, and you can see that there are these nice old and weathered clinkers, including this beautiful pattern in the center. But these aren't original, because in the 1960s, this whole area was paved with asphalt and totally infested with cars.
Okay.
So all of the clinkers you see here are actually from other parts of the city.
Yeah.
These are the bricks that were worn and weathered, and they were saved so that they could be used somewhere like this,
That's so
which is
dope.
an absolutely brilliant idea for reusing old material.
Yeah.
This video shows the machine that the city of Amsterdam uses to automatically clean, inspect, process, and pack weathered
Oh,
clinkers for use in renovations of historic neighborhoods. I'll leave a link to the full video in the description. And this is another major benefit to using clinkers. They last for many decades. Asphalt streets typically need to be resurfaced every 10 to 15 years, depending on how much traffic drives over them.
really?
But a street made of clinkers can last 30 years or more. My hometown in Canada recently built this one street in their downtown with paving
Oh,
stones. This is the only one they built
I
though,
like
so it'll be
that.
interesting to see how this street holds up over time compared to the
I
surrounding
really
asphalt
like
streets.
that.
Streets with clinkers do need
Yeah, I
maintenance.
mean, clinkers, the fact that they're so reusable. Like even when they're not, you can't just put them right back down. You still, hey, get them cleaned up, put them in that certain part of town, bro. They're never trash. Like you can continue to reuse them for different purposes over and over and over and over again. That's awesome.
Of course, as over time the ground may shift and the surface becomes uneven. But these are relatively easy and inexpensive problems to fix and without any machinery required. Especially compared to asphalt, which requires frequent resurfacing and sealing to avoid cracks and water penetration.
Hmm.
Asphalt roads can develop potholes and other problems, but this mostly happens if water is allowed to penetrate through the cracks in the surface. Eventually, water gets into the subsurface and the base layer needs to be repaired,
And
which means
potholes
the
up.
entire road needs to be replaced early and the road becomes even more expensive to maintain over time. The solution to that is to fill cracks as soon as they are discovered, which helps to prevent potholes and makes the road last much longer,
That
even
looks
in
kind of
freezing
ugly though.
temperatures. Of course, the problem with North American cities is that because of car-centric urban sprawl, there are so many kilometers of asphalt per person that it's too expensive to maintain it all to an acceptable level. Yet another reason why designing a city exclusively for cars makes it worse for drivers. These gaps in the clinkers allow for expansion, so these streets deal much better with changes in temperature. At very high temperatures, asphalt becomes softer and stickier, but clinkers can easily handle extreme heat because they were baked at over 1,000 degrees during their manufacturing.
God dang.
Asphalt is also a significant contributor to the urban heat island effect that can make cities even hotter in hot weather. which doesn't really
Really?
happen with clinkers because they absorb much less heat than asphalt does. So, sorry, you won't be able to fry an egg on the clinkers.
Are
Clinkers are more expensive than asphalt to install initially, but maintenance is
they?
relatively inexpensive and the street lasts a long time. So, overall, streets and sidewalks made with clinkers are actually less expensive than those made with asphalt and concrete, which means that Dutch cities are actually saving money by having these nicer looking streets. And since clinkers are mostly manufactured from river clay that can be sourced locally in the Netherlands, they're a relatively sustainable material,
I'm
especially compared to asphalt that requires imported bitumen made of petroleum.
got
For what
you.
it's worth, asphalt is one of the world's most recycled materials, but the process is
Oh,
very
is
energy
it?
intensive, and every time it's recycled, it requires new bitumen. Another problem with asphalt is that it prevents water from naturally infiltrating the ground, which leads to problems with stormwater runoff, flooding, and strain on the drainage system. Clinkers can be installed with sand or gravel joints that allow some water to get through, but not too much, or otherwise the water will erode the base material and cause the surface to become uneven. There are special clinkers that are designed with holes in them and usually have grass growing
Oh,
in them as well, which looks pretty nice. But these are
yeah.
usually only used for temporary and private parking spaces, otherwise, the grass wouldn't get enough sunlight. So, on a typical street, there will still be a gutter with a different pattern of clinkers that leads to storm drains, just like any other street. So, you might be thinking, if clinkers are so clinking great, why would any city use asphalt at all?
That's a good
Well,
question.
it wouldn't be a Not Just Bikes video if I couldn't blame cars for something. Ultimately, a street like
Yikes
this is
for
not going
cars.
to hold up well to a large amount of motor vehicle traffic. The
Okay.
clinkers will quickly deteriorate and develop ruts and grooves,
Got you.
which is why asphalt is still used on roads with high car volumes, even in the Netherlands. But this brings up an extremely important aspect of Dutch street design.
Because I
The
was
very
wondering where the weakness in clinkers is. Because so far it was nothing but absolute amazingness and positivity. And I started, why don't we do clinkers here in the U.S.? But I mean, in a country that's literally built for cars, I guess clinkers really wouldn't work here.
very clear distinction between distributor roads and neighborhood access streets. In the 1990s, Dutch transportation engineers created a program called Sustainable Safety, which is a comprehensive road safety philosophy that probably deserves its own video someday. But the one aspect that's important here is that every road in the Netherlands is strictly categorized into three types. The first is the snelweg, which is a highway or through road.
Hmm.
They're wide and straight, and they have merge lanes for entering and exiting. The important thing, though, is that highways should go between cities and around cities, but never through the middle of cities.
Mm,
Urban freeways are an absolutely terrible idea for many, many reasons, but I've talked about that several times before and it's not really relevant here.
got you.
The second category is the Gebiedsontsluitingsweg, which is a distributor road, and I'm just going to refer to these as roads. These are designed to be connections between places within a city, but they are not highways, and they will still have traffic lights or roundabouts. But importantly, they will not have driveways to any destinations, because that would negatively affect efficiency and safety. These are the roads with the asphalt. This is in stark contrast to a strode, the word coined by Strongtowns for this kind of road. These are pretty much the default design for any road built in the US and Canada, even in the middle of cities where they have absolutely no business being built. Stroads are expensive, inefficient, and extremely dangerous because they try to combine high speeds with lots of destinations, resulting in many points of conflict that create dangerous situations and slow down through traffic. But I have a whole other video about stroads if you want to learn more.
Mm.
And thankfully, because of sustainable safety, multi-lane stroads lined with driveways and side streets do not exist at all in the Netherlands, and our roads are much safer.
I feel that.
The third and
I
final
feel that.
category is the Erftoegangsweg, or neighborhood access street. And to bring it back to the topic of this video, this is where you'll find the clinkers. A strict safety requirement for any Erftoegangsweg, and I'm just going to say street from now on
Okay.
because that word is way too long,
Yeah.
is that they cannot exceed a certain number of motor vehicles per day.
Oh,
The exact number differs by region, but it's typically no more than 5,000 vehicles per day in rural areas and half that number in urban areas. And importantly, if any street exceeds this amount of traffic, then the street will be modified or redesigned to
Oh,
reduce car traffic to well under that maximum amount. Sometimes by installing barriers that cut off the street to through traffic by motor vehicles. A good example of this is this design near our house in Amsterdam. This used to be a through street for cars, but after construction, it was blocked off to motor vehicles, and now this part of the street is only accessible to people walking and cycling.
dang.
So, by meeting the requirements of a neighborhood access street, it is guaranteed that motor vehicle volumes will not be too high for a street that is made with
That
clinkers.
sound pretty great.
For a street to be a neighborhood access street, it also needs to have a low speed limit, normally 30 kilometers per hour within cities. So they are designed with traffic calming like speed bumps and chicanes and other methods to slow down drivers. But the clinkers actually play a part in this too.
Really?
Because of the uneven surface, these streets produce more road noise when driven over than an asphalt street. And this is a great feature of clinkers because it sends a subconscious message to the driver that they should not be driving quickly here.
That's a good point.
The traffic
That's a
calming
good
elements
point.
themselves are also made out of standardized parts that fit together, such as these large square pieces that make up the ramps to this speed bump. Other times, the whole speed bump will be made of clinkers with this white brick pattern signifying that a driver needs to slow down.
Oh,
And at the intersection of two low-speed streets, the entire junction is raised up to sidewalk level like a big speed bump made out of clinkers, and you yield to anybody coming from the right. The boundary between a distributor road and a neighborhood access street is also well defined, with something called an uitritconstructie, which is a word I have a hard time pronouncing properly, but it's basically this thing, and I've referred to these before as continuous sidewalks. Now, I have a whole video from the early days of the channel about continuous sidewalks if you want to learn more, but I actually think that these are so important that they should be required to be built in every city everywhere. So I want to mention them here
every city,
too.
everywhere?
Right now, we're on a road, a gebiedsontsluitingsweg,
Yes.
and because it is designed for the efficient flow of traffic, vehicles on this road have priority over any side streets. They never need to stop. The continuous sidewalk is here, and as you can see, the sidewalk continues through the whole junction across the side street. The sidewalk stays at the same level. This makes sense in the context of a road because people on the road have priority over anybody coming from the side street. And this includes people walking and cycling because the Netherlands acknowledges that those people exist and have just as much of a right to the road as people in cars,
I feel
which is
that.
a truly novel concept that I never experienced in Canada.
Nah, you
The
only
continuous
experience that. I feel like in North America, period. Um, but I absolutely love the design of the streets. I love these clinkers. I feel like it just perfectly fits the Netherlands. But the Netherlands is different, bro.
sidewalk has
I
these
like
ramps
it.
on either side that are made out of larger curb pieces. And the corners are made out of these sharp 90-degree angle clinkers that prevent drivers from taking the turn too quickly.
Mm,
All of these are standard pre-built components that are used all over the Netherlands. These curbs act as big speed bumps that guarantee that a driver will have to slow down before crossing the sidewalk,
fact.
which significantly reduces the risk of a crash. They also make it clear that people walking and cycling have priority over any driver going in or out of the side street. By comparison, this is what a typical junction to a side street looks like in Canada, and most other countries for that matter.
Yeah.
Here, the sidewalk ends, and anybody walking needs to step down to the level of the road and cross the asphalt.
Yeah.
What's even worse is that the corner radius is very large, because they are designed to allow drivers to take the turn at high speeds, which is insane, because nobody should be turning quickly in or out of a side street. I
I
honestly
do agree
don't
with that.
understand how any traffic engineer could possibly think that this is an acceptable design, but this kind of junction off of a strode is the norm for the US and Canada. And given how often drivers go right through stop signs without coming to a complete stop, this is a serious safety issue, which is why continuous sidewalks have become part of the standard road design guidelines here
A
in the
lot of people
Netherlands.
definitely do that.
So these continuous sidewalks have an important role in safety, but they also clearly indicate when you are moving from a distributor road to a neighborhood access street. This forced speed bump that requires slow speed, combined with the change in road material to clinkers, sends a very clear message to drivers that they have exited the higher speed distributor road and have entered into an area designed for mixed traffic and slower speeds. All of these elements combine together to make Dutch streets fundamentally safer, especially for anybody outside of a motor vehicle. So, given all of these guidelines, you might be surprised to see a street like this. This is very clearly a neighborhood access street, but it has asphalt that would imply it's designed for higher traffic flow. So,
Hmm.
why is that? Well, ultimately, it's because all of these guidelines are still pretty new. The first sustainable safety program was only introduced in the 1990s, and the implementation details have been refined since then as municipalities find out what construction methods work best.
Hmm.
And since streets can last up to 30 years, it simply means that there hasn't been enough time for every street in the country to be reconstructed. This results in some very strange situations, such as an older asphalt street like this that has had speed bumps installed recently entirely
Oh,
made out of clinkers. But as streets are redesigned, they're brought up to the latest standard and things keep getting better. And I think that that might just be my absolute favorite thing. I never used to look forward to road construction, but I definitely do here in the Netherlands. Because while construction can be inconvenient, when it's complete, the streets become nicer looking, safer, and really just better in every way. Something else I'm a fan of is
skip the sponsor. Oh, that might be the rest of yes, the rest of the video. That's crazy though to find out about. I think the clinkers do work perfectly for the Netherlands, and I think they're an awesome concept and awesome idea in keeping the road safe for bike or for cyclists, for people, for pedestrians walking, and keeping these cars at low speeds. And then also aesthetically, it does look a lot better. It's cheaper due to the inexpensiveness on the maintenance part. Um, and yeah, it just works well. Y'all let me know what y'all think and the difference between clinkers and asphalt. If you enjoyed, don't forget to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. Check out the next one. I'll see you.